A gang challenged the wrong man, The Rock. One brutal mistake, and now they're about to face unstoppable justice. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe for more. Check out our other videos for more amazing content, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. The rain-soaked streets of a remote town in Eastern Europe glistened under the dim glow of flickering streetlights. The scent of gasoline and cheap beer lingered in the air outside a rundown roadside diner, a place where outsiders were met with cold stares and unspoken warnings. Parked outside in a jagged row were motorcycles, their chrome frames reflecting the dull neon sign above the entrance. A group of burly men occupied the diner's porch, their leather jackets adorned with symbols of a gang that ruled this town with an iron grip. In the center of the gang sat a man named Victor, a towering brute with a face carved from years of brawling and a heart filled with hatred for anyone who didn't fit his narrow worldview. His laugh was harsh, his words venomous, as he made crude jokes at the expense of anyone unfortunate enough to pass by. Tonight, the gang's attention was on the few unlucky customers inside, all too afraid to challenge their presence. The low rumble of a powerful engine cut through the night as a black SUV rolled into the lot, its polished surface gleaming under the hazy streetlights. The vehicle came to a halt, its driver's side door opening with a heavy thunk. From it emerged a figure dressed simply in a black hoodie and jeans, broad-shouldered, towering, and effortlessly imposing. Dwayne, "The Rock" Johnson. The moment The Rock stepped out, the gang's conversation faltered, their jeering tones replaced with murmurs. Victor's eyes narrowed as he took in the sight of the newcomer. He didn't recognize him. He didn't need to. To Victor, all that mattered was that an outsider had dared to enter their domain, and worse, had parked his car next to their prized motorcycles. With a slow, calculated smirk, Victor leaned forward, propping his elbows on the wooden railing. "Well, well, well," he drawled, his thick accent coating every word in mock amusement. "Look what we have here, boys. Some big city tough guy thinks he can just waltz in here like he owns the place." The gang members chuckled, their laughter low and filled with malice. One of them, a wiry man with jagged teeth known as Luca, spat onto the ground, his sneer widening. Maybe he got lost. Maybe he needs directions. Or a lesson. Unbothered by their stares, The Rock shut his car door and adjusted his sleeves, his expression unreadable as he walked toward the entrance. He wasn't here to fight. He wasn't here to prove anything. He just wanted a meal. But Victor wasn't going to let him off that easily. As The Rock reached the steps of the diner, Victor moved to block his path, standing inches from the larger man. "You lost, big guy," he taunted, his grin widening as the gang closed in behind him. "This ain't a place for tourists." The Rock lifted his gaze, locking eyes with Victor. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a steady, controlled patience that spoke volumes. "I'm here to eat," he said, his voice a low rumble of quiet authority. "That gonna be a problem?" Victor's smirk twitched. He was used to men backing down, to fear flashing in their eyes. But this man was different, and that unsettled him. "Depends," Victor mused, circling The Rock like a predator sizing up its prey. "If you think you can just walk in and act like you belong here, well, maybe we need to remind you whose town this is." Luca chuckled darkly. "Maybe we start by moving that fancy SUV of yours before it gets scratched." The gang erupted into laughter, their voices echoing through the empty lot. But The Rock didn't laugh. He didn't even move. He simply exhaled, his expression remaining eerily calm. "I'd think real hard about that," he said, his voice like distant thunder. "Because if you touch my car, we're gonna have a different kind of conversation." The amusement drained from Victor's face. He didn't like being challenged. He didn't like the way The Rock spoke with absolute certainty, like he already knew how this encounter was going to end. That single statement, so calm, so assured, sent a ripple of unease through the gang. Victor leaned in closer, his breath reeking of alcohol and arrogance. "You got a lot of nerve, stranger, but nerves won't save you when my boys and I decide we don't like you." The Rock's gaze never wavered. His hands remained relaxed at his sides, but the energy around him shifted. The storm was coming, and they had no idea. "Then I guess we'll find out," he said coolly. The night was about to take a turn no one would forget. Inside the dimly lit diner, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of grease and cigarette smoke. The Rock sat in a booth near the window, quietly eating his meal, his broad frame making the seat seem almost too small. The air buzzed with low murmurs, the other customers stealing nervous glances at the gang still gathered outside. They could feel the tension seeping into the walls, the inevitable storm brewing just beyond the diner's doors. Outside, Victor leaned against the railing, his smirk never faltering. "Luca," he called, motioning toward the diner. The wiry gang member cracked his knuckles and stood, his slicked back hair barely shifting as he strode toward the entrance, his boots clicking against the wooden porch. The others watched eagerly, the anticipation of violence flashing in their eyes. As Luca stepped inside, the conversations in the diner fell silent, heads turning toward the unwelcome intruder. He moved with slow arrogance, eyes locked on the Rock, a sinister grin creeping across his face. He stopped at the edge of the booth, placing both hands on the table as he leaned in close. "Nice car you got out there," Luca sneered, his voice like gravel. "Might want to move it before it gets messed up." His smirk widened, revealing yellowed teeth. The Rock, unfazed, continued chewing, his gaze lifting to meet Luca's with a cool, unreadable expression. He didn't speak, didn't flinch, just studied the man in front of him like a wolf sizing up an overly confident predator. The silence stretched, thick enough to choke on. Luca's grin twitched, irritated by the lack of reaction. He straightened, cracking his neck. "You deaf big guy, I'm trying to give you a friendly warning." His words dripped with sarcasm, but the barely concealed threat was razor sharp. Finally, the Rock set his fork down with deliberate slowness, his movements measured and precise. His voice, calm and steady, cut through the tension like a blade. "I came here to eat, not to deal with some punk trying to prove himself." His tone was low, almost a whisper, but it carried enough weight to make Luca shift uncomfortably. Luca, unwilling to back down in front of the silent crowd, chuckled darkly. "You think you're tough, huh?" He leaned in again, his breath reeking of cheap beer. "You have no idea where you are, friend. This ain't your kind of town." Before the situation could escalate further, a sharp voice rang out. "Hey, leave him alone." The waitress, a petite woman with defiant eyes, stood near the counter, her hands clenched into fists. Her voice carried more authority than her small frame suggested, but Luca merely turned, eyeing her with mild amusement. "This doesn't concern you, sweetheart," he spat. "Go back to refilling drinks." The Rock's chair scraped against the floor as he stood, towering over Luca. The movement was slow, methodical, but the effect was immediate. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop, the air thick with anticipation. Luca, now realizing just how much bigger the Rock was, swallowed hard, but tried to mask his unease with bravado. "I'd listen to her," the Rock said, his voice carrying a finality that sent a shiver down the spines of those watching. "Because if you don't walk away now, you're not going to like how this ends." Luca clenched his jaw, momentarily caught in a battle between pride and self-preservation. With one last scowl, he stepped back. "You just made a big mistake," he hissed before turning and storming out of the diner. The moment the door swung shut, the tension didn't ease, it only thickened. The Rock knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Outside, Luca relayed the confrontation to Victor, whose smirk twisted into something darker. He cracked his knuckles, eyes gleaming with malice. "Well, boys," he said, rising to his feet, "looks like we've got ourselves a guest who doesn't understand the rules." The gang rose in unison, their movements slow and deliberate, like predators closing in on prey. As The Rock finished his meal and dropped some cash on the table, he took a deep breath, knowing what awaited him outside. The moment he stepped out, Victor and his gang spread out, encircling him like a tightening noose. The Rock stopped, taking in the scene, his body still, his expression unreadable. Victor stepped forward, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. "Leaving so soon?" he taunted. "We thought you might want to stick around. Have a little fun." The gang chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. The Rock rolled his shoulders, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. He had given them a chance. They hadn't taken it. Now they were about to learn exactly who they were dealing with. The night was eerily quiet, save for the low hum of insects and the distant sound of tires rolling along the empty road. The Rock stood still in the middle of the diner parking lot, his hands in his pockets, shoulders squared, and eyes locked onto Victor. "I don't want any trouble," The Rock said, his deep voice steady, his tone more of a warning than a plea. The gang exchanged glances, some uncertain, others amused. Then, like a match to dry kindling, laughter erupted, sharp, cruel, and growing louder. It spread through the group like wildfire, their sneers twisted in smug delight. Victor took a step closer, his breath thick with alcohol and arrogance. "You don't want trouble?" he scoffed, shoving a thick finger into The Rock's chest. "Wrong place, wrong town. You should have kept driving." The Rock remained motionless, unblinking. The moment stretched, the gang waiting for him to react, to flinch, to show the smallest crack of fear. Instead, he exhaled slowly. Victor's smirk widened, mistaking patience for weakness. He turned to his men, motioning with a jerk of his head. "Let's show him what happens when you disrespect the black vultures." The gang shifted like a pack of wolves preparing to strike. The night air thickened with tension, the anticipation of violence humming through the lot. One of them, a brute named Ilya, cracked his knuckles, his eyes gleaming with sadistic pleasure. Another pulled out a rusted chain, letting it dangle ominously from his fist. The Rock barely moved, his gaze sweeping over the gang. He took in every detail, the grip on their weapons, the telltale twitch of muscles preparing to lunge, the overconfidence in their eyes. "You sure about this?" he asked, voice calm, unshaken. Victor laughed, brandishing a thick steel pipe from his belt. "You don't get it, do you? You're alone. You don't belong here." He let the words sink in before raising the pipe. "Now you're gonna pay for it." The Rock's jaw tightened. His fingers flexed. Then, in a motion too fast for any of them to anticipate, he struck. His fist connected with Ilya's jaw like a wrecking ball, the sickening crack of bone echoing through the lot. Ilya's body twisted midair before crashing onto the pavement, unconscious before he even hit the ground. The gang barely had time to process what had happened before The Rock moved again. A second attacker swung the rusted chain, aiming for The Rock's ribs. With a swift duck, he dodged it, catching the chain mid-air and yanking it with explosive strength. The thug stumbled forward, off balance, just in time for a brutal elbow to smash into his temple. He collapsed instantly. Chaos erupted. Another rushed in with a baseball bat, swinging wildly. The Rock sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. The sickening pop of a dislocated shoulder was followed by a scream as the bat clattered to the ground. Without hesitation, The Rock drove a knee into the attacker's stomach, sending him crumpling to the dirt. The gang hesitated now, their confidence shattered. But Victor wasn't done. Fury burning in his eyes, he roared and charged with his steel pipe raised high. The Rock didn't move until the last second. Then, like lightning, he spun, delivering a thunderous kick to Victor's ribs. The force sent the gang leader flying backward, the pipe slipping from his grip as he crashed against a motorcycle, knocking it over with a loud clang. Silence. The remaining gang members stared at their fallen leader, at the carnage of their comrades groaning in pain on the ground. Their bravado had vanished, replaced by something else: fear. The Rock stepped forward, towering over Victor, who clutched his ribs, coughing. He knelt slightly, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of finality. "I told you, you really didn't want to do this." A pair of headlights flashed across the lot as a vehicle approached, the unmistakable silhouette of a police cruiser slowing to a stop. The gang froze, realization dawning that this night had taken a turn far beyond their control. Victor wheezed, still glaring, but he said nothing as the sheriff stepped out, his hand hovering over his holstered weapon. "Well," the sheriff muttered, surveying the scene, "looks like someone just cleaned up my town for me." The Rock straightened, adjusting his sleeves. "Just passing through." The sheriff smirked. "Next time, let me know. I'll bring popcorn." The chaos in the parking lot had reached its peak, the night air thick with the scent of sweat, blood, and adrenaline. The Rock stood in the center of it all, his chest rising and falling steadily as he surveyed the battlefield of broken bodies around him. The gang, once so confident, now lay scattered across the pavement like discarded chess pieces, groaning and writhing in agony. Victor, the leader of the Black Vultures, struggled to his feet, his face a mess of bruises and rage. His gang, the ones who were still conscious, looked to him, waiting for a command, waiting for a sign that they weren't completely defeated. But Victor was beyond reason now. His pride had been crushed, his authority shattered, and the only thing left was pure, unhinged rage. From his pocket, he pulled a long, gleaming switchblade, the blade catching the dim light of the street lamps. He flicked it open with a snap, his breathing ragged, his hands shaking. "Let's see how tough you are now," he snarled, lunging forward. The Rock didn't move until the last second. Then, with the precision of a trained fighter, he sidestepped Victor's wild swing, caught his wrist in a bone-crushing grip, and twisted. A scream tore from Victor's throat as the knife clattered to the ground. With a final decisive motion, the Rock slammed Victor face first onto the hood of a nearby motorcycle, his strength rendering the gang leader completely defenseless. The parking lot fell into an eerie silence, save for the distant sound of sirens approaching. The Rock exhaled, releasing Victor, who slid to the ground in a dazed heap. The sheriff's cruiser screeched to a halt, red and blue lights flashing across the scene. The door swung open, and out stepped Sheriff Cole, a grizzled lawman with a sharp gaze that missed nothing. He took one look at the battered gang members sprawled across the lot, then at the Rock, still standing tall and unscathed. "Well," Cole muttered, adjusting his belt, "looks like someone did my job for me." The Rock gave him a half-smirk. "Just helping keep the peace." Cole let out a short chuckle before motioning to his deputies. "Round them up." One by one, the battered and bloodied gang members were hauled to their feet, their hands cuffed behind their backs as they were shoved into the waiting patrol cars. Victor, barely able to stand, was the last to be dragged away. He locked eyes with the Rock, hatred still burning beneath the humiliation, but he knew this was over. He knew this night would haunt him forever. The crowd that had gathered at the diner's windows spilled out into the parking lot, hesitant at first, then erupting into applause. People clapped, cheered, some even whistled in admiration. The fear that had once gripped them had been shattered, replaced with something else: relief. A young boy, no older than 10, hesitantly approached, clutching a battered notebook. His mother held onto his shoulder, urging him forward. The Rock crouched down, his hard expression softening. "Can I get your autograph, sir?" the boy asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Rock took the notebook, flipping to a blank page, before scrawling his signature with a simple message. Stand tall. Be strong. Never back down. As he handed the notebook back, the boy's face lit up with pure joy. His mother wiped a tear from her eye, nodding gratefully to The Rock. Sheriff Cole watched the exchange before stepping up beside him. "So," he said, "what's next for you?" The Rock looked toward his black SUV, then up at the night sky. "Got a long road ahead," he said, "but for tonight, I think I'll take the scenic route." With that, he climbed into his vehicle, the engine roaring to life. As he pulled away, the townspeople continued to cheer, their voices following him as he disappeared into the night. Another battle fought, another lesson taught. And somewhere in the darkened streets of another town, trouble was waiting. But so was he. The story of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson standing up against injustice teaches a crucial lesson. True strength lies not in brute force, but in integrity, restraint, and the courage to do what is right. In today's world, discrimination, abuse of power, and bullying persist, but we must stand firm against them. Respect should be earned through actions, not intimidation. Never judge someone by their appearance, and never allow fear to silence you in the face of wrongdoing. Justice prevails when good people refuse to back down. Stand tall, be strong, and always fight for what's right, because real power is righteousness. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe Undercover Insights channel.